The rain came down in relentless sheets, the kind of October storm that made the streets shine like rivers of light and sent most sensible people hurrying for cover. Daniel Brooks pulled his truck into the parking lot of Fletcher's Hardware, the last stop on his Thursday evening route. At 41, he'd been driving delivery trucks for almost 15 years, not glamorous work, but steady, honest, and it let him be home for his daughter most evenings. He was running late tonight. His last delivery had taken longer than expected, and now the storm was making visibility terrible. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who watched his 10-year-old daughter, Mia, after school. "No rush. Mia's helping me make cookies. Take your time in this weather." Daniel smiled. Mrs. Patterson was a blessing, a widow who'd taken genuine interest in helping him raise Mia after Daniel's wife, Jennifer, had died from breast cancer 3 years ago. Some days, Daniel still couldn't believe he was doing this alone, but somehow, he and Mia were managing. He finished unloading the hardware supplies and was heading back to his truck when he noticed someone at the bus stop across the street. The covered bench offered minimal protection from the sideways rain, and huddled there, soaked to the skin, sat a young woman in a wheelchair. She wore a red sweater that clung wetly to her frame, and even from across the street, Daniel could see she was shivering violently. A worn backpack sat in her lap, and she stared down at it with the defeated posture of someone who'd run out of options. Daniel paused with his hand on his truck door. The bus stop was part of a route that only ran until 6 o'clock. It was now past 7. Wherever she'd been trying to go, she'd missed her chance. He should get home. Mia was waiting. The roads were getting worse, but the woman looked so utterly alone, and something about the slump of her shoulders reminded him of how Jennifer had looked during her worst days, of that particular exhaustion that came from fighting battles most people couldn't see. Daniel made his decision. He jogged across the street, getting thoroughly drenched in the process. As he approached, the young woman looked up, and he saw her face clearly for the first time. She was probably in her mid-20s, with blonde hair plastered to her face and eyes that held a wariness born from experience. There was a fading bruise on her cheek, barely visible in the dim light. "Excuse me," Daniel said gently, raising his voice to be heard over the rain. "The buses stopped running about an hour ago. Are you waiting for someone?" The woman looked at him for a long moment, assessing, deciding whether to trust this stranger. I thought they ran later," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Daniel felt his heart sink. "Do you have family nearby, friends you could call?" She shook her head, wrapping her arms more tightly around her backpack as if it contained everything she owned, which, Daniel realized with a jolt, it probably did. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. The woman's hesitation was answer enough. Daniel crouched down so they were at eye level, rain streaming down his face. "Listen, I know you don't know me, and I understand if this makes you uncomfortable, but I can't leave you here in the storm with no way to get anywhere. I have a daughter at home. We have a guest room. It's warm and dry, and I can make you something to eat. No strings attached, just a dry place to stay until this storm passes and you can figure out your next step." The woman studied his face, and Daniel could see the internal struggle, the desperate need for help warring with learned caution. Finally, she said, "Why would you do that?" "You don't know me." "Because someone helped me once when I needed it," Daniel said simply. "And because it's the right thing to do." "My name is Daniel Brooks. I have a 10-year-old daughter named Mia. We live about 15 minutes from here. You'd be safe, I promise, and if at any point you want to leave, I'll drive you wherever you want to go." Something in his face or his words must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. "I'm Cassie. Cassie Turner. Nice to meet you, Cassie. Come on, let's get you out of this rain." Daniel's truck wasn't equipped for a wheelchair, but between them, they managed to get Cassie into the passenger seat. Daniel loaded her wheelchair into the truck bed, covering it with a tarp, and then they were off, windshield wipers working overtime against the downpour. "I should tell you," Cassie said after a few minutes of silence, "I don't have money to pay you back for this, for the food or the room or anything. I want you to know that up front." "I'm not asking you to pay me back," Daniel said. "I'm offering you help because you need it." Cassie was quiet for a moment. "People don't usually do that." "Not without wanting something," "Some people are like that," Daniel acknowledged. "But not everyone. Sometimes kindness is just kindness." When they pulled into Daniel's driveway, I am at a two-story house in a quiet neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson's porch light was on across the street. Daniel helped Cassie into her wheelchair and wheeled her up the ramp he'd installed years ago when Jennifer's mobility had become limited near the end. Inside, they were greeted by Mia's excited voice. "Dad, Mrs. Patterson and I made chocolate chip cookies." And as she stopped, staring at Cassie with open curiosity. "Hi, who are you?" "This is Miss Cassie," Daniel said, helping Cassie out of her soaked sweater and replacing it with one of his dry hoodies. "She's going to stay with us tonight." The storm caught her at the bus stop with nowhere to go. Mia, who'd been raised to be kind and welcoming, smiled broadly. "Do you like cookies? We made extra." For the first time since Daniel had met her, Cassie smiled at a small, hesitant thing, but genuine. "I love cookies." Over the next hour, Daniel made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup while Cassie dried off and changed into some of Jennifer's old clothes that Daniel had been meaning to donate. Mia chattered away about school, about her friends, about the book she was reading, filling the kitchen with warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. Daniel watched Cassie gradually relax, saw some of the tension leave her shoulders as she ate her first real meal in what was probably days. She was careful and polite, thanking him repeatedly, but there was something fragile about her, like she expected this kindness to evaporate at any moment. After dinner, while Mia did her homework at the kitchen table, Daniel sat down with Cassie in the living room. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," he said gently. "But if you want to talk, I'm here to listen." Cassie looked down at her hands for a long time. Then, in a quiet voice, she began to speak. She'd been in a car accident 2 years ago, a drunk driver who'd crossed the center line. She'd lost the use of her legs and most of her savings to medical bills. Her boyfriend at the time had left her 6 months into her recovery, unable to deal with the situation. She tried to make it work, tried to keep her job as a retail manager, but the company had let her go during restructuring, though Cassie suspected her disability had played a role. She'd moved in with a friend, but the friend's husband hadn't wanted her there. She'd bounced between temporary situations, a cousin's couch, a church shelter, anywhere that would take her. But resources were limited, especially for someone with her mobility needs. Tonight, she'd been on her way to a shelter across town when she missed the last bus. "I'm not a charity case," Cassie said, her voice defensive despite its softness. "I'm trying to find work, trying to get back on my feet. It's just everything's stacked against me. No one wants to hire someone in a wheelchair. The housing I can afford isn't accessible. And I'm so tired of being treated like I'm broken, like I'm a burden everyone has to bear." Danielle recognized the pain in her words, and the exhaustion of fighting a world that wasn't built for you, that saw your challenges before it saw your worth. "You're not broken," Daniel said firmly, "and you're not a burden. You're someone who's been dealt a difficult hand and is doing your best with it. That takes strength, not weakness." Cassie looked at him with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. "You're the first person in a long time who's treated me like I'm still a whole person." "You are a whole person. The wheelchair is just how you get around. It doesn't change who you are." Over the following days, what was supposed to be one night stretched into a week. The storm had caused flooding that closed the shelter Cassie had been headed to. Daniel couldn't bring himself to put her back on the street, and Mia had taken to Cassie immediately, delighted to have a big sister around. Cassie, for her part, insisted on contributing. She helped Mia with homework, taught her how to make French braids, and organized Daniel's chaotic kitchen cabinets with a efficiency that suggested she'd once been very good at her retail management job. "You don't have to earn your place here," Daniel told her one evening after Mia had gone to bed. "You're welcome here regardless." "I know," Cassie said, "but I need to feel useful. I need to feel like I'm contributing something, not just taking." Daniel understood that need, the necessity of dignity, of purpose, of not being reduced to your circumstances. "Okay," he said, "but understand that you're not here on probation. You have a place here for as long as you need it." 2 weeks became 3. Daniel helped Cassie update her resume and taught her how to apply for jobs online. Mrs. Patterson, who'd taken a grandmotherly interest in Cassie, shared job listings from her church network. Mia insisted Cassie help her practice for the school talent show. Slowly, Cassie began to believe that this kindness wasn't temporary, that she wasn't going to wake up one morning and find herself back on the street. 1 month after that training night at the bus stop, Cassie got a job interview, a work-from-home position with a company that specialized in customer service. The pay was decent, and the accessibility wasn't an issue. Daniel drove her to the interview, waited in the lobby, and when she came out smiling, he knew without her saying a word that she'd gotten the position. "They loved me," Cassie said, her face brighter than Daniel had ever seen it. "They said my retail management experience was exactly what they needed. And the fact that I work from home doesn't matter. I start next week." "That's wonderful," Daniel said, genuinely proud. "I knew someone would see how capable you are." That evening, Cassie helped Daniel make dinner while Mia set the table, and it felt natural, like family. Like this was how things were supposed to be. "Daniel," Cassie said as they chopped vegetables, "I need to talk to you about something." Daniel looked up, noting the serious tone. "Okay, I've been here for a month. I have a job now. I can start looking for my own place. Start getting out of your hair." "You're not in my hair," Daniel said, "but if you want your own space, I understand. Just don't feel like you have to rush." "You're welcome here." Cassie set down her knife. "That's just it. I don't feel like I have to rush. I feel like I belong here. And that scares me." "Why?" "Because every time I let myself feel settled, feel safe, it gets taken away. The job I lost, the boyfriend who left, the friend's house I had to leave. I'm afraid to believe this is real." Daniel turned to face her fully. "I can't promise nothing will ever go wrong. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that Mia and I aren't going anywhere. You're part of our family now, Cassie. If you want to be." Cassie's eyes filled with tears. "I want to be." More than anything. 6 months later, Cassie had saved enough from her job to contribute to rent. Daniel refused at first, but she insisted. "I'm not your charity project," she said with a smile. "I'm your roommate, let me pay my share." They fell into a rhythm, Daniel working his delivery routes, Cassie working from home, Mia thriving with the stability of their unconventional family. Daniel found himself looking forward to coming home, not just to see Mia, but to see Cassie too, to hear about her day, to share dinner, to watch old movies after Mia went to bed. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Mia play with the neighborhood kids, Cassie said, "You know, I used to think the accident ruined my life, that it took everything from me. But if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been at that bus stop. I wouldn't have met you and Mia. I wouldn't have found this." "Sometimes the worst things lead to unexpected blessings," Daniel said. "That's what I learned when Jennifer died. I thought losing her was the end of everything. But it taught me to appreciate the present, to cherish the people I love, to not take good things for granted." Cassie looked at him. "Is that what I am? A good thing?" "You're the best thing that's happened to us in a long time," Daniel said honestly. 2 years after that training night at the bus stop, Daniel and Cassie were married in a small ceremony in their backyard. Mia served as maid of honor, beaming with pride. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears. And Daniel, holding Cassie's hand as they exchanged vows, felt Jennifer's presence too, not as a ghost or a loss, but as a blessing, a reminder that love comes in many forms and that sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin in the most unexpected ways. Cassie's vows included a promise. "You saw me when I was invisible. You offered shelter when I had nowhere to go. You treated me like I was whole when the world saw me as broken. You taught me that kindness isn't weakness and that family isn't always about blood, it's about showing up. I promise to show up for you, every single day, for the rest of our lives." Years later, Cassie would sometimes tell their story to others in support groups for people with disabilities, in talks about homelessness and accessibility, in simple conversations with friends. She'd talk about that night at the bus stop, about a man who stopped when he could have driven past, about how one act of kindness had changed the trajectory of her entire life. "The wheelchair didn't ruin my life," she'd say. "It led me to my life, to Daniel, to Mia, to a home and a family and a purpose." Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. And Daniel, listening to his wife speak, would remember that rainy October evening when he'd made a choice, not a grand heroic choice, but the simple one: to see someone who needed help and to offer it, to treat a stranger with the dignity every human deserves, to open his door and his heart to someone the world had overlooked. Sometimes, he learned, the most important thing we can do is simply stop, to see the person at the bus stop, the one everyone else walks past, to recognize that we all carry invisible burdens, that we all need help sometimes, and that offering shelter, whether physical or emotional, is never wasted. Cassie hadn't needed to be fixed or saved. She'd needed to be seen, valued, and given a chance. And in giving her that chance, Daniel had gained more than he'd given: a partner, a friend, a love that had bloomed from compassion and grown into something neither of them had expected but both of them cherished. All because on a rainy night, he'd said the simplest, most powerful words: "Come with me."